Working with someone who makes you feel crappy just sucks. And it's easy to write them off as a toxic person. But when you understand toxic behaviors and where they come from, you can actually do something about it. And that's what today's guest is going to unpack for us. Today's guest is Dr. Sheela Reddy. Sheela has more than 25 years of experience in trauma-informed leadership psychology, a PhD in multicultural system psychology, and a fellowship in trauma. She's a published author, speaker, and coach. And she loves conducting experiential learning workshops to increase EQ and develop empathy for diversity in teams for organizations. She's most passionate about increasing mind health, reversing the effects of trauma, and developing empowered, liberated, skilled, and resilient diverse female leaders. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's my conversation with Sheela. Thank you so much for joining me today, Sheela. Really excited to talk with you about some of the challenges of toxic behaviors that show up in the workplace, because I think so many of us and so many of my clients are struggling with people who display not the most helpful behaviors. And we're all trying to figure out, am I the one doing that? And then what do I do about it when it's someone else? So thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Can you kick us off with just explaining in your words, in your frameworks, what are some of these toxic behaviors that we see, and kind of how do you think about those behaviors and maybe the sources of those behaviors?
I have been very interested in this concept that's not really widespread yet, called the Dark Triad. So quick background, I worked in domestic violence as a clinical director. I started my career there. I was always interested in leadership and seeing toxic behaviors in my workplace. Even though we were working with domestic violence victims, there was a lot of dynamics within the team that got me interested in team dynamics. At the same time, I was helping my ex-husband run a IT company, and I saw the lack of confidence and certain behaviors that were not very healthy there. So this got me interested in this journey of eventually wanting to do leadership work around helping people who had these behaviors change if they were remorseful, as well as helping others who were exposed to this behavior find ways to cope and build their confidence, assertiveness, and really become happier and healthier, because these behaviors hurt people. The concept that I really wanted to bring to the audience is this concept called the Dark Triad. This is the Dark Triad behaviors in organizational psychology. The Dark Triad is a pretty dark concept. It is behaviors that are related to, it's narcissism, it's Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. Narcissism, people have heard a lot about. There is the grandiosity, the need for attention, the lack of empathy, the need for a lot of external validation, and being very exploitive in relationship. Machiavellianism, some people may have heard of Niccolo Machiavelli. He was many, many centuries ago. He was a politician who basically said that, the way to get ahead is to be very deceitful and strategic and not really care about other people's feelings. So that's where the concept of Machiavellianism comes from, which is the manipulative, the strategic, and the exploitation, the indifferent to morality, and the emotionally detached and dishonest, and they're disingenuous. And, people can feel it, but these people also might come across as being very charismatic. So you may not see the disingenuity in the beginning, because they might boost your ego a little bit, and you might fall for that, so to speak, and not see what's coming later. The psychopathy is related to the Machiavellianism, where there's callousness, right? It's very self-centered. So you're not really caring about the other person's feelings, and the person is being calculative. They're also impulsive in their decision making, and they're very quick. They might also be extremely intelligent. So this is where it's hard to battle someone like this, they're extremely intelligent and know how to pivot and know your vulnerabilities. They will take advantage of that. And if you are not strong enough, it's almost like, I tell people, it's like they can pick up the scent of vulnerability. Then they go for the jugular. They build a relationship, and then they'll go for the jugular. So there's a lack of guilt for this dark triad. Now, I don't think all toxic behaviors in workplace, people who have these kind of behaviors or emotionally reactive, all fall under the dark triad. The dark triad is one way of looking at these extremely toxic people. And they have, shallow emotions and affect. So if you want me to try to explain it with a story, I can go right into that, or we can go somewhere else. What
Oh,
would
I
you
would
prefer?
love a story. I love stories.
Okay. So I should have kind of started with a story. But, so let's take this example of, I'm just going to use the word Victor as the person. It could be a man, it could be a woman. These behaviors are not generally just men doing it to women. I've heard a lot in a lot of all female workplaces that there are toxic behaviors too. So this person is, Victor is visionary, he's charismatic, he's bold, he knows where he wants to go, he can give really persuasive speeches, and he looks like he is listening to the person, and he'll be validating too. So Elena is his partner, and he validates Elena. He says, yeah, I understand, that's a really good idea, and we really should work on that. In public, he'll say, I really love Elena, I really want her to succeed, she's an amazing partner to me. But in the private space, after the first initial, I really like you, Elena, I really like what you're doing, it's awesome, then there's a slow sort of like, no, I don't agree with the idea. That's kind of a stupid idea. Why would you think of that idea? And starts cutting down Elena's self-esteem. So it's this boosting up, and then like one time, but then boosting down 10 times. I see this pattern, and this is where I got interested, is in domestic violence, in relationships where the partner is abusive emotionally. It's not, people say, what's the worst case you saw, and this is in DV. It's not the physical violence, it's this slow cutting down of the emotions, and it really affects the person. So they want the spotlight. Elena will do something, will work hard and accomplish a task, but Victor will say, that's my idea, you didn't do anything. Without my idea, you wouldn't have done anything. But Elena is the one who has actually executed the idea and probably talked to the team, got new ideas, built up all of this. So Victor is not the one who's very good at communicating with the team, because Victor just has these ideas, wants people to execute it, actually runs a very high pressured environment because he wants things done fast and quick and things this can all be done, and is really unempathic and really wants to make the progress and make the money. You can see how this works. And not only criticizes her, gaslights her. This is an interesting, the gaslighting, people use this concept gaslighting very often, but you need to understand what gaslighting it really is. It is about denying the reality. So make promises. We'll do it this way. Of course, that's a great idea. I can't believe you came up with it. I promise you we're going to finish it this way. I promise you I'm going to do this. And later Elena comes up and says, hey, Victor, you said we would do X, Y, Z. And he's like, no, I didn't do that. When did I say that? I never said that. And so then Elena's like, am I crazy? Like, did he not say that? And the more she asks him that, he's going to keep denying it. And what happens is actually a trauma reaction at the end of all of this, because it's either a fight or a flight. So gaslighting, as they call it, is lighting the fire, is I make you feel bad enough long enough, and you're going to get into a fight mode. And then you'll say something mean to me, and then I'll be like, look, you're all bad.
Oh my gosh, this is so complicated and so intense and so emotionally draining to go through that. Why do people do this? Like, do we know why people act in these ways, especially if it's not the like small percentage of people who are truly have a medical condition? But a lot of these behaviors, maybe it's not all the time, maybe it's not with every single person they interact with, but you definitely see some of these behaviors in the workplace. And so, where does this come from?
I like to call it the gray zones of the dark triad or the narcissism, right? There are some people who are truly actually gain pleasure from other people's misery. They are antisocial, they are psychopathic. They want others to be miserable, and they kind of feel like they're the best. And they do take advantage of people. Like that's the sort of the one end of the spectrum. And then you have like the other sort of different pieces, right? Someone who's maybe just have some personality issues, someone who's had a role model, a parent who has model this behavior, who doesn't know how to behave differently. Trauma. Trauma in people's lives creates a whole bunch of symptoms that people don't understand. And this is where I really want to get into the workplace and educate people, is the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. You either fight, you either get frozen and then you fight. You try to keep pleasing the other person. So it's a fawn response, but you might have low self-esteem. So for some time, you're trying to please, and then you're like, I'm doing so much for this person. They're not doing anything. And then you get into this toxic behavior because
Yeah.
you're resentful that you've done so much and the other person hasn't done anything. So then resentments can create toxic behaviors. The inability of them being able to manage their own stress, that's the key. Like I talk about EQ, I brought this into an EQ framework because I was really trying to figure out, how do I bring this into the workplace in a way that people understands. So I developed an entire test based on my research of resilience, toxic behavior, trauma. And it's about managing yourself. It's about how do you manage others. Are you able to manage your own stress? Do you have the ability to have some belief that you're grounded in, which I call spirit, clarity, energy management? And then on the autism ADHD spectrum, what you do find, you're not, now someone who's severely autistic, who has difficulty even functioning in the world, is not what you're going to see. What you're going to see is the high functioning autism, where they're very, very smart. But I want people to understand this. They're not bad people, but they actually, what I've found is they don't feel. They're actually not able to relate to emotion. So the empathy part has to actually be taught in words because they don't feel it. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. And it must be hard.
It's sad for them, but that's how I guess the universe built them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're really smart people, so they're able to contribute a lot to our organization, but their behavior can be very toxic. So this is where the coaching comes in.
If we're listening and I will be honest about myself here,
Mm-hmm.
that there are times where I feel like, oh, I probably gaslit somebody. Oh, there was a time where I said yes, 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 yes. And then I was like, no. Or, but some of these behaviors, they kind of live in all of us. So what can we do if we're being self-reflective and we recognize that maybe we have some of these unhealthy patterns? Like, do we have to just start with go get a therapist and unpack your whole childhood, or are there other
Not
things that we can
necessarily.
do?
I'm going to quickly share this. So this is sort of my model that I created. It's a test that I created. What you talked about, I wouldn't call as gaslighting.
Okay.
What I would call that is, a lot of us are not assertive. A lot of us are not aware of our and we're not emotionally aware. We're not aware of our boundaries. We want to please others, and we may say yes too quickly because we don't want conflict, and we're not assertive. So this is where the self-management and people management come. This is the biggest piece that I feel like in coaching, we talk about mindset shift, but one of the pieces that isn't talked about is actually feeling the emotion and being able to tolerate the discomfort. You cannot regulate or change an emotion without actually sitting with the discomfort.
Yes, I remember learning about the idea of distress tolerance. And can you manage those negative feelings and experiences in a productive way that allows you to keep moving forward instead of getting stuck or running away from it or being set back by it? Is that the right definition?
So it is not even managing, it's actually even allowing yourself to feel it and being okay. So it's distress tolerance, right? You use the right word, actually. Distress tolerance is being able to sit with the distress.
Let's just stay on this topic for a second here. So I can imagine all of these places where distress tolerance shows up in work, right? We're sitting in a meeting and it's going off the rails and it feels super uncomfortable. And you're just like, I just want to get out of here. And so you kind of shut down and stop paying attention, or kind of, go internally and kind of avoid. Or you need to give someone feedback. And so you just avoid giving them feedback because you're like, I don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. Are there things that we can do to start building our level of distress tolerance? Because it sounds like that might be a key step in changing some of these other bigger behaviors.
Right. So the first belief system is distress will pass. Your distress might be telling you something.
What might it be telling you? Like, what is that distress other than like, I'm afraid? Like, what else might it be telling you?
It could be telling you, you could say, oh, I'm distressed because I really don't want to engage in this conflict. So that's the emotional awareness part. It could be telling you, this is wrong. I want to, social justice, I want to change something about this. I'm uncomfortable because this is not right. I mean, we are living in this world of non-DEI when we're living in a multicultural America. And multicultural conversations are difficult. I come from a culture that I say I'm privileged, but my culture can also be very racist. And so when I'm in social situations where I find a friend saying a stereotypical something about anybody, any other culture, African American, Chinese, Caucasian, whatever, there's this, oh, they're all like this. I started doing this a long time ago. I'm like, why would you say that? How many friends do you have of the other culture? It's a not all of that. It does not go well with other people.
Mm-hmm.
It is not a comfortable place for me because I know I'm very clear now because I've done a lot of emotional regulation, and it's not a comfortable place for me because they could reject me. They might judge me. But I'm very clear that I don't like pigeonholing people because I know people from so many cultures, and this America has offered me so much, and every single person from a different race has given me such rich experiences and love that I stand up for that. So that's my clarity. So you need to be clear. So how do you tolerate distress? You need to be very clear about what your purpose is. You need to be able to articulate that purpose with passion when you're making your statement. It is, you're not intending to hurt. Why are you feeling uncomfortable? You're saying that maybe that fear is they might judge me, or it's just like I don't want to get into it because it might get more uncomfortable. But if I know what I'm doing is right and good for the world, I say, you've got to ground yourself in these very deep values. I read Stephen Covey when I was 20 years old and came to this country, and I live a principled life. If you're living a principled life and you know where you're going with it, it becomes very clear what you need to say, what your decisions are. It doesn't mean I don't feel discomfort, mind you.
Mm-hmm. It's the tolerance. It's that you can tolerate it because of the bigger vision and purpose. Okay, let's shift back to how to navigate and what are some of the strategies for coping with someone who is displaying these kind of unhealthy and toxic behaviors. Obviously, starting with, you have to be able to manage the distress that it's creating for you. But like, what else can we do? Can we actually help them change? Can we just protect ourselves?
There's a power differential, right? So in a work environment, I think there's HR, there's a power differential. If this person has a lot of power, it's very difficult to confront them directly. If you're fearful, it's different. So I'll use the example. I use Elena, but that was a real example of somebody I know actually. And that person she had an anxiety attack and a breakdown. I had actually hired her to do some work with me. And through discussing, she said, I just realized that I had a trauma reaction to that. She never realized it until she started working with me. What had happened to her, that burnout that she had was due to all of this. So you want to stop before that burnout happens, right? You want to recognize that this is not right. I don't deserve this. And that comes from you knowing your rights, your confidence, you knowing that you're worth it, you're doing things right. So it comes back to really building up your confidence. One. Two, in a work environment, it's really important to document everything. I say, if you're working with somebody like that, don't say anything, write it. Because if you are clearly articulating, I need this, I want this, can we decide on a time frame? Have it very logically documented when you're asking for something, because that gaslighting thing I talked about, where they might be telling you what you want to hear but not follow through, it's avoided because there's accountability when it's documented. And the regulation part, if that person is dysregulated and you're uncomfortable and you're fearful and you're going to take on, so one of the things which I didn't talk about is, when I said there's no emotional awareness, that person's actually putting, these people create high stress environments because they're actually internally stressed. They have all these ideas and they can't follow through, right? So they're going to bring this anxiety to you. So they're actually, if you can begin to see that anybody's emotions and reactivity may not necessarily have to do with what you did, and it's more about them. Anything big is really never about the person. It's how that person is reacting to this, right? It's an inappropriate behavior. So you have to say, that's that person, like separate. So if you need to visualize like a wall, some barrier between you and the other person, putting almost like a emotional distance, and that I say the most important thing is the breathing techniques, because logic will not work when you go into a fight, freeze, fawn response. Your body is gone into a I'm in danger, danger, danger place. First thing you got to do is calm your body. So long, deep breaths, oxygenating your brain in the moment can try to bring you back. The other technique is engaging your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, right? So you calm your animal brain, the one that's seeing fear, and then you say, okay, let me bring my logical brain online. And actually say the words, saying words to yourself, saying them out aloud, even in a whisper, is engaging your thought process brain. How may I have handled the situation? An alternative perspective. How may I have handled the situation if this person was 5 years old? Would I be this scared? I use a 5-year-old metaphor often, because if this is your 5-year-old child throwing a tantrum, you would handle it differently. You would take a deep breath. You say, okay, the person's throwing a tantrum. It's nothing I did. What do I need to do? So you can co-regulate, which means the louder and crazier the other person becomes, the quieter and calmer you get.
Yes. It's really funny you mentioned this 5-year-old thing because I just had a conversation with a client where I know she's a mother of multiple children, and sometimes we talk about her parenting, and I was saying to her, you know all the right strategies of how to meet people where they're at, how to not let their emotions become your emotions. Like you do it so well as a mom that from the stories you've told me, but you're struggling to do it at work. You need to think of each of your colleagues as another 5-year-old in your life and recognize that they're having the same emotional situations, reactions, stressors, etc. And you need to show up with that same level of calm and that same level of clarity about what does success look like out of this conversation? How can you validate them? How can you keep your cool when their emotions are rising? And she was so funny because she was like, I never thought of that. Like, I've always assumed that like adults have their crap together. And like, I don't need to worry about, all of these things because they're adults. They're mature. They should be able to handle this. She's like, but you're right. They are just 5-year-olds in big bodies. And I was like, yes, we are all 5-year-olds in big bodies.
When we're emotionally reactive, we're dysregulated. I've been learning more about in trauma treatment, and you may have heard it, IFS, it's internal family systems. So a
Yes, I
lot,
love
and it's
it.
real. I love it because it really talks to when you become aware to know that this particular action, this particular behavior is coming from a less evolved self, which is possibly reacting to a perception of something else, which is not really objective. And we are all doing that, right? So even this client of yours is looking at that person and reacting from some part of herself which is not as strong and confident as her mother role.
Yes. And so interesting how when we're in different roles, we might choose to act differently because of that level of confidence that we have in that role, which is why I think it makes sense that if you're managing a team, that you might show up in certain ways. But then when your boss is around, you show up in different ways because you feel more emotionally vulnerable or more or less confident or et cetera, et cetera. So fascinating. But we have to start to wrap up,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Mhm.
So, Sheila, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
So it was my first job in America, and my first boss who hired me. What made her a great boss is when I took on a project when I was very young. I was 21 years old, and I was doing this program for somebody else, another person who I really looked up to. I was like, that's the kind of person and leader I want to be, dressed like that, look like that. It was like idolizing this person. And my boss came up to me and said, that person's going to take credit for what you did. You need to stand up for yourself. And she said, you have put in all this hard work. And my boss actually brought me into the project, guided me. She did not take credit for it, even the guidance that she gave me. She just said, I want to protect you. And I want to tell you that this person's going to try to take advantage of you. And I said, but she said, no, you did everything. So you need to stand up for yourself. And she gave me credit. It was a life altering. And I have always remembered that story because I was uncomfortable standing up for myself. I was not assertive and I had to say no. And I remember I had tears in my eyes and I was like, no, I did all the work. I can't give your program the credit. And this person, eyes grew wide. I mean, it felt like she was going to eat me up.
Oh gosh.
Because she wanted to take credit. And I stood my ground and I went away feeling really crappy because, I wanted to please her too because I idolized her. But in hindsight, that was the best thing. And it taught me how to be a leader. I think I was always luckily, I never take, I mean, I'm less likely to take credit than give credit, which is a good leadership trait. But I think it also taught me to stand up for what I've done and take credit for what I've done in the most humble way possible, but not let people walk over me that easy. That's my story of a great boss who trained me,
Love
guided
it.
me, told me I was wonderful, saw all the positives in me, and told me that. So many years later, when I said, "How did you hire me?" I was 22, I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know cultural mores, and I came with a blue skirt, white shirt, and red jacket. I didn't even realize it was American colors. And she said, "You were just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed." And she said, "That's all you need." And again, these little things she told me, I have taken through for the rest of my life.
So beautiful. And such a good reminder, too, that this is a lifelong journey and a lifelong evolution of learning these skills, practicing these skills, deepening these skills. It is not something that we're expected to just know how to do or have figured out after a couple of months and be done. I know how to be assertive. I know how to manage my stress. I know how to do whatever it is. Like, this is a lifelong journey for all of us.
Absolutely. So I have
And
a very quick model that I'd like people to think about, and it's an ask model. I call it my ask model. A is really work on your awareness. Ask yourself awareness. And the second is learn the skill you need to learn. There's always, if I say I'm assertive today, like you said, there's more I can learn in that. If I say I'm aware, there's more I can learn in that. And then keep practicing. You have to keep practicing. So it's the awareness, the skills, and the keep practicing that's going to get you to the next phase.
that's right. Amazing. And where can people learn more about you, Sheela, and keep up with all your work?
You can learn about me. I'm on Instagram, Dr. Sheela Reddy. I'm on Facebook. I have risemind.org is my current website. We're also building RiseMind Works, which is going to be a platform where we're going to give all this information to people, really to empower people out of this space of being stuck.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again so much for joining me today. I loved our conversation so much.
Thank you. I mean, I enjoyed talking about it and getting my brain working too.